Parents threw their own Halloween parties, loud, happy gatherings in living rooms and basements back then. A dented metal tub waited for apple bobbing. Donuts hung from strings like moving targets, and laughter spilled into the night. The record player clicked, hissed, and dropped a needle on Monster Mash, while dads tried to outdo one another with louder capes, bigger eyebrows, and props. It was wholesome disorder. Kids darting underfoot, adults dancing in costume, paper plates balanced on stair rails. Everybody had fun. Nobody needed a screen. Teenagers ran a version of Halloween all their own. Spook dances turned school gyms into orange and black caves. Fruit punch glowed in a glass bowl. A DJ spun early rock and roll 45s until sneakers squeaked across the varnish. Someone always wore a Dracula cape. Someone always fixed the punch and passed the news like a secret. It wasn't fancy, but it was electric. You walked home under stars, grinning, ears still ringing, breath making ghosts in the cold. Candy demanded comparisons. After trick-or-treating, you met friends and weighed pillowcases by hand, arms acting as scales. Mine's heavier. Yeah, but I've got more chocolate. The bragging could last night, but it was friendly. Everyone understood that the real winner was whoever still had candy a week later. That was the true measure of Halloween success. If you were lucky, you opened a Ben Cooper box. Inside waited a stiff plastic mask with tiny eye holes and a thin elastic string destined to snap halfway through the night. The smell of plastic rose the second you lifted the lid. You wore it proudly, fogging it with every breath, convinced that for one night you were the monster on the cover. If no store mask appeared, you built your own. Kitchens became workshops where mothers and kids cut holes in sheets, glued cardboard, and wrapped everything in tinfoil until ordinary things turned magical. There was a spell in the smell of burning leaves on a crisp October evening. Smoke and cold braided together and made you tug your jacket tighter. You grabbed a pillowcase, checked the flashlight, and headed out with friends. Porch lights glowed like beacons, and for a few hours the whole world seemed to belong to kids again. Even the smallest towns hosted parades. Children rode in wagons. Marching bands marched in wool uniforms. Floats rose from hay bales and cardboard letters, wobbly and proud. The whole town lined the curb. The air was crisp. Drums echoed down Main Street while candy rained from passing trucks. It wasn't about perfection. It was about pride and the warm feeling that everyone belonged to the same story. Classrooms dressed for October, too. Every window wore cardboard skeletons and witches taped up, their corners curled by the sun. Teachers hung black cats and paper pumpkins, and the room smelled like crayons and paste. The decorations were simple, but they made the whole school feel alive. You spent all day staring at smiling ghosts, waiting for the party to start. Some neighbors thought of everything. They handed tiny paper cups of hot cider to parents waiting at the curb, steam curling into the cold. You sprinted past, too busy chasing doorbells to notice. Yet apples and cinnamon followed you anyway and filed themselves under home. Costumes weren't something you bought so much as something you made. Moms and kids spent afternoons cutting and pinning, gluing and wrapping. A box became a robot. A broom handle became a magic staff. Tin foil turned into armor, antennas, or a moonbright helmet. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about using what you had, and somehow that made every costume feel like your own invention. Under the streetlights, you could hear the crunch that only autumn makes. Houses glowed faintly through the trees, and you followed the flicker of jack-o'-lanterns down the block. Somewhere a dog barked. Somewhere a screen door slammed. Mostly it was quiet, just you, friends, and the endless rustle of leaves under your sneakers. At school, the gym turned into a holiday playground. Orange and black streamers draped from basketball hoops, cardboard ghosts on the walls, and a metal tub filled with apples waiting for bobbing. You lined up laughing while someone dunked too deep, and came up sputtering. Water splashed everywhere. The air smelled like wax candy and popcorn. It was simple, merry mess, the kind of fun that never needed rules. Every kid tried wax lips, vampire fangs, or a mustache that tasted oddly sweet and a little like crayons. You bit until the shape flattened, then tossed it and reached for another. Half candy, half toy, fully essential. No Halloween felt complete without them. They came in tiny cardboard boxes at the 5 and dime, right beside candy corn and licorice ropes. Candy corn showed up everywhere, bright little triangles of orange, yellow, and white, returning each October like migrating birds. Small cellophane bags often carried a smiling pumpkin on the front. You'd eat a few, swear you didn't like them, and keep eating anyway. It wasn't a really Halloween until a glass bowl of candy corn sat on somebody's coffee table. Trick or treating felt like adventure itself. No parents following behind, no phones, just a small parade of kids with flashlights and pillowcases flying from porch to porch. You rang a bell, shouted, "Trick or treat," and moved on before the candy even hit the bag. The night seemed endless. The streets felt familiar, yet pleasantly strange, and every porch light promised another handful of magic. Every porch held a real pumpkin carved by hand, flickering with a real candle inside. Lids turned black with smoke, and the air smelled like warm pumpkin. Some faces were scary, some crooked, some downright funny, but each one was made with care. You could tell which dads had helped, the ones with eyebrows, teeth, and perfect triangle eyes. There was always a mother who made caramel apples by hand, glossy and sticky, wrapped tight in wax paper. You peeled it back and took that first bite, the caramel stretching in shining strings. Sometimes there were chopped peanuts, sometimes just smooth golden sugar. You could always tell the homemade ones. They tasted like fall itself, sweet and smoky all at once. Before plastic pumpkins ever showed up, every child hauled a paper grocery bag or an old pillowcase. The paper ones never lasted. One drizzle and you were clutching a soggy mess, candies skittering down the sidewalk. The smart kids carried spares, just in case. Still, there was something about that crumpled brown bag, plain, ordinary, and somehow perfect for a night like Halloween. We didn't have cell phones or glow sticks, only one flashlight for the group. 6 kids walked close together, its weak yellow beam bobbing ahead. You took turns holding it like a badge of honor, sweeping it across trees and porches to look brave. The darkness around you didn't feel frightening then. It felt alive, charged with mystery and excitement. Black and orange Tootsie Pops always turned up in your bag, though the flavors rarely matched their wrappers. You'd twist one open as you walked, guessing whether it was chocolate, orange, or something somewhere in between. The stick stained your lips. Your teeth tugged at the chewy center, and you didn't care. It was part of the fun, that little Halloween mystery, every single year. Every October, teachers dimmed the lights, grabbed a flashlight, and read ghost stories right there in class. The beam threw wild shadows across the walls, and the smell of crayons and chalk dust filled the room. Someone always squealed at the good parts. You weren't really scared, just thrilled in that safe, perfect way. It was the best kind of classroom magic. The neighborhood haunted house was always somebody's garage cardboard walls. Stringy cobwebs and a bowl of peeled grapes passed off as eyeballs. Cold spaghetti became brains, and everyone screamed anyway. Nothing was professional about it. It was heart, imagination, and a few flashlights. You knew it wasn't real, yet the moment you stepped inside, laughter and fear blended into something unforgettable. The first time you saw a full-head rubber monster mask, it seemed almost too real. The glossy, sweaty face, those bulging eyes, it looked alive beneath the streetlight. Those masks were expensive, worn only by older kids who loved to scare. They'd lurk behind bushes or jump from driveways. When they did, you swore your heart stopped. It was terrifying and unforgettable. Little wax soda bottles were Halloween gold. You'd bite the top, drink the sugary liquid, then chew the wax like gum until the flavor vanished. They came in bright colors: red, yellow, green, and rattled in your pocket all night. Nobody really liked them, but nobody threw them out either. They were part of Halloween's strange little relics in every bag. No costume ever kept out the cold. That October wind slipped right through thin fabric, sending shivers down your arms. Some kids wore jackets underneath, but that ruined the look. You'd rather freeze than hide your superhero cape or ghost sheet. That mix of cold air and candy-fueled excitement, that's what fall felt like in the 1960s. Popcorn balls were the crown jewel of homemade treats, wrapped in wax paper. They stuck to your fingers and tasted like butter and sugar heaven. Every block had at least one neighbor who made them, handing them out warm from the kitchen. They never lasted long gone before you even got home. Store-bought candy was fine, but nothing beat a popcorn ball still soft inside. There was always that one neighbor who handed out pennies, apples, or little boxes of raisins instead of candy. Kids smiled politely, disappointment written all over their faces. Those houses became known quickly skip number 12. Looking back, they meant well. In a night full of sugar and noise, they were simply trying to be thoughtful. Every store downtown dressed for the season. Cardboard Dracula, Frankenstein, and mummy cutouts leaned in window displays beside fall coats and toy trucks. The artwork looked straight out of Famous Monsters magazine, dramatic, colorful, a little scary. Even grown-ups smiled walking by. Before inflatable decorations or LED lights, that simple world of paper and paint made October feel like the most special month of the year. As the night went on, a certain hush settled over the street, just the hum of streetlights and distant laughter. Sometimes fog rolled through, catching the glow of porch bulbs and turning the block into a movie scene. You'd pull your candy bag close, listen to the quiet, and feel like you were part of something bigger. When It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown first aired, it became an instant classic. Families gathered in living rooms, lights dimmed, bowls of popcorn balanced on laps. You knew the story, but it never mattered. Linus and that pumpkin patch felt like old friends. The animation flickered softly, and everyone laughed in the same places. For one night, even parents stayed up to watch. Candy cigarettes were pure mischief. You'd tug one from the little red and white box, puff out sugary dust, and grin like a movie star. No one thought twice. They tasted chalky, sweet, faintly minty, but it was never about flavor. It was about pretending. Every kid wanted to look cool, even with a sugar stick dangling from their mouth. There was an unspoken neighborhood rule. Porch light on meant come on up. Porch light off meant move along. Nobody needed signs or safety apps. You just knew the rhythm of the night came from those glowing lights, each one a tiny beacon calling kids forward. When the last few went dark, it felt like the curtain falling on Halloween itself. Moms were resourceful back then. When they ran out of candle holders, they'd set candles into old coffee cans filled with sand. Those flickering lights lined porches and driveways, glowing steady against the wind. The cans blackened with smoke, but nobody cared. They worked perfectly. You'd see little flames dancing down the block, and it felt like the whole neighborhood was shining together. Each year, boys dressed as hobos or cowboys, and girls as witches, fairies, or princesses. Costumes came from closets and imagination. A worn hat, a broom, a borrowed scarf. Nobody needed movie characters or superheroes. It was about make-believe. And the funny thing is, even if you wore the same thing 3 years in a row, it still felt brand new every Halloween night. Before plastic pumpkins, there were paper-mache jack-o'-lantern buckets bright orange with wire handles and goofy painted faces. They softened in the rain and started to peel, but kids used them anyway. By the second or third Halloween, the paint had chipped, and the grin looked lopsided. Still, you kept it. It was your Halloween bucket, and it carried years of candy and memories. Some houses went all out with sound effects, scratchy old records of thunder, witch laughs, and ghostly wails. You heard them long before you saw the porch. Speakers crackled and echoed across the street, making you walk a little slower. It wasn't about being scared. It was about the thrill of pretending to be. Somehow, it worked every single time. Halloween in the 1960s had its own smell. Candle wax dripping inside jack-o'-lanterns, caramel cooling on wax paper, and the faint trace of wood smoke from someone burning leaves. The air felt sharper, cleaner. Each breath carried a dozen tiny memories at once: laughter, candy, cold fingers, flickering lights. You didn't realize it then, but you were breathing in a season that never really left you. Pumpkin pies cooling on windowsills perfumed whole blocks. You'd catch the warm, spicy scent of cinnamon and nutmeg drifting out as you walked home from school, certain that fall was fully underway. Moms baked from scratch then real pumpkins, flaky crusts, and a little extra sugar on top. Sometimes they'd cut a slice just to test it. Nobody said no. Every school held a Halloween parade. Kids marched around the blacktop in costume, while parents snapped photos with Kodak cameras. The click of shutters mixed with laughter and leaf rustle. Cowboys, witches, and ghosts filed past the principal's office as teachers cheered. It wasn't fancy, but it felt big the one day when school actually celebrated fun. Before inflatable spiders and plastic tombstones, decorations stayed simple. Carved pumpkins on the porch, a few corn stalks, maybe a cardboard witch taped to the door. Some families set out lanterns with real candles instead of electric lights, and the glow they cast was soft and alive, flickering across porches and sidewalks. It made the whole street feel warm, timeless, welcoming. After trick-or-treating, you dumped your haul across the living room rug like a miner spilling treasure. Candy slid everywhere: chocolate bars, gum, lollipops, the odd pack of crackers. You sorted them into neat piles: keep, trade, toss. Parents smiled from the couch, pretending not to sneak a few pieces. That sweet, happy chaos felt like the reward for a night of pure magic. Later, when the porch lights finally dimmed and the street fell quiet, you'd sit on the floor and count again, trading one last time, hiding a favorite for tomorrow. The television murmured from the corner, a late movie you were too tired to finish, and somewhere a pumpkin candle sighed out. Your costume slumped on a chair, still warm with the night. You promised yourself to save more candy next year, to walk one more block, to stay outside a few minutes longer beneath the cold stars. October meant leaf piles, and every dad turned raking into an occasion. You'd help just long enough to earn one glorious jump, diving in and burying yourself beneath mountains of red and gold. Then you'd lie perfectly still, listening for your friends, and when they wandered close, you'd erupt, shouting, tossing leaves like confetti. Nobody minded the mess. That kind of laughter was always worth the cleanup. Wearing your Halloween costume to the corner store felt like a small parade. The cashier grinned, maybe slipped an extra candy into your bag, and told you how terrific you looked. You stood there in mask and cape, feeling a little like a movie star. It was a small-town kind of fame, only a few minutes long, but it felt like the whole world noticed. After trick-or-treating, the older kids gathered under the streetlight or along the curb to trade ghost stories. Someone always held a flashlight under their chin, turning their face hollow and haunted. There were tales of shadows near the old house, or glowing eyes in the trees. You half believed, half laughed it off. The best part was not knowing, that delicious braid of fear and fun. The radio scored the night. Top 40 hits by the Supremes or the Beatles rolled between DJ chatter, wolf howls, thunderclaps, and spooky greetings. You'd hear Monster Mash at least once an hour, usually introduced with a theatrical howl. Static faded in and out while you walked, that eerie mix of pop and playfulness drifting through the cool October dark. Every neighborhood had that one neighbor who could bake. Around Halloween, they handed out homemade fudge-thick, rich, perfectly sweet. You unwrapped it from wax paper, still soft and warm. It never lasted. Store-bought candy filled your bag, but that square of fudge stood out. Even decades later, you could taste it. The kind of neighborly kindness that doesn't come in a wrapper. 5 and dime stores turned into treasure chests each October. Near the register hung paper skeletons and witches with jointed limbs fastened by tiny brass brads. You posed them, taped them on your wall, and by Thanksgiving they were sun-faded and curled. But for those few weeks, your room felt alive, like Halloween had slipped inside and decided to stay. Every kid knew the thrill of passing a dark house and feeling watched. You'd swear a curtain moved just a flicker, a shadow, maybe a face. You laughed it off and walked faster, clutching your candy bag tighter. It was probably nothing. That was the magic. The world felt mysterious in a way that never quite felt unsafe. Parents worried less back then. Their biggest concern was you eating too much candy and getting a stomachache. You'd come home sticky-fingered and buzzing, and your mom would sigh, "Save some for tomorrow." Nobody checked wrappers or counted pieces. Somehow the world felt safer, and the only danger on Halloween night was a sugar high and staying up too late. The firehouse was always part of the evening. Firefighters handed out safety pamphlets. Watch those candles, and usually slipped in a candy bar, too. The trucks gleamed under bright lights. Sometimes you could climb up and look inside. Parents loved the peace of mind. Kids loved the candy and the sirens. It was small-town America at its best. Safe, friendly, proud. Kids bragged about their homemade costumes. The cardboard robot wrapped in foil. The astronaut with a cereal box control panel. The ghost cut from an old sheet. Store-bought masks were fine, but they couldn't compete with creativity. You'd beam when someone asked, "Wait, you made that?" It wasn't just a costume. It was proof that imagination, not money, made the best Halloweens. There was always an older brother who took his title of chief scarer far too seriously. He hid behind trees or crouched by the sidewalk, waiting for the perfect jump scare. The scream that followed echoed down the block, ending in laughter and a few candy wrappers tossed his way. Everyone knew it was coming somehow. He still got you every single year. Space fever was everywhere in the 60s. Kids wrapped themselves in aluminum foil, called themselves astronauts, and strutted down the street wearing cardboard helmets. You'd shout, blast off, and pretend your pillowcase of candy was a moon rock collection. NASA made everyone dream bigger. Even Halloween turned cosmic. For one night, small-town sidewalks became outer space. Brown paper grocery bags or pillowcases were the go-to haulers. You flipped them inside out and wrote your name in big letters so nobody mixed them up. They started light, swinging in your hand, then grew heavier with each house. By the end of the night, the handle stretched, your arms ached, and you couldn't wait to dump everything across the living room floor. When the firehouse opened its doors on Halloween, kids lined the block. Inside, volunteers built a haunted maze from tarps and cardboard lit only by red bulbs. Frankenstein jumped, a ghost drifted. Someone banged trash can lids for thunder. You screamed, laughed, and walked out feeling brave, a free lollipop in one hand and your heart still racing. By the cash register at the 5 and dime, you always found little wax harmonicas. Red lips, tiny pumpkins cheap, silly fun for a few pennies. They never tasted great, but you loved them anyway. You'd chew a wax harmonica like a blues player and toss it when the flavor vanished. Those small throwaway treats made Halloween feel alive everywhere you went. Every kitchen looked the same before sunset. Fabric scraps, masking tape, scissors, safety pins scattered across the table. Moms made last-minute fixes while kids fidgeted with excitement. Someone was missing part of a costume. Someone couldn't find their mask. It was noisy, chaotic, wonderful. By the time you stepped out the door, it felt like the whole family had built that costume together. Pumpkin carving was a family event. Newspapers spread over the table, sleeves rolled, spoons scraped. Knives traced careful lines. Everyone laughed at the mess. The sharp, sweet smell of pumpkin filled the room. Dad always cut perfect triangles. You tried for fangs or eyebrows. Seeds were saved for roasting later. When the candle finally went in, that crooked face came alive, glowing, proud, and yours. Coming home from trick-or-treating, you dropped your bag, clicked on the TV, and watched the faint flicker of static while you sorted candy. The house was warm. The night outside was quiet. You counted chocolate bars like treasure, traded with siblings, and tried to stay awake just a little longer. That mix of sugar, TV glow, and tired laughter? Pure childhood contentment. New masks carried a smell you never forgot, sharp rubber mingled with candy and cold air. You'd hang one on a doorknob, and for days it held the scent of Halloween night. The elastic stretched, the paint rubbed thin, but you kept it for next year anyway. It wasn't just plastic. It was a reminder of every laugh, every scare, every chase. Some houses went all in, candles flickering behind lace curtains. A whisper of organ music from inside. The light shifted and wandered like something alive. You stood there a second before knocking, half hoping they wouldn't answer, half hoping they would. When the door finally creaked and a smiling face appeared, you laughed with relief and got 2 candies for being brave. Every neighborhood had its legends. The apple that vanished if left on a windowsill. The ghost that appeared if you spoke her name into a mirror. Kids dared each other to test them, shrieking whenever anything moved or creaked. Nobody truly believed. For one night, anything felt possible. Maybe that's why the memories cling so stubbornly. Porch bulbs glowing like moons, the scuff of sneakers on damp pavement, the rattle of candy in a pocket, and your name scrawled on a pillowcase that smelled faintly of laundry soap. You carried home more than sweet's warmth from neighbors' porches, daring from your friends' dares, and the pride of finding your way, block by block, beneath a lantern of autumn stars. That was the secret of Halloween. Imagination was real, and magic stood near. Inside every cereal box, you hoped to discover a plastic monster ring or a tiny rubber skeleton. They didn't glow yet, but you swore they twitched when the lights went out. You wore one to school like a badge, showing it off between classes with a grin. Cheap plastic, sure, but it made you feel wealthy in excitement, the kind of treasure only children can truly see. Some porches strung fishing line from post to post with paper bats and ghosts bobbing in the breeze. They swayed and spun whenever the wind picked up, throwing wobbly shadows that crawled over clapboard and brick. You could hear the faint creak of string, the whispery flap of paper. Simple, homemade magic, just scissors, tape, and imagination, and it worked better than anything store-bought. Before bed, you curl up with highlights or Jack and Jill and read the spooky stories tucked in the back. The pictures were gentle yet strange. Smiling ghosts, talking cats, kindly witches. Scary enough for a kid, never too much. You closed the magazine, switched off the lamp, and stared at the ceiling, wondering what might be out there in the dark. Front yards on Halloween night had a glow all their own. Jack-o'-lanterns fluttered, leaves glittered under streetlights, and shadows danced across fences. The air smelled like wood smoke and sugar. Every sound a laugh, a rustle, a footstep felt part of something larger. You didn't think of it as a holiday. It felt like life itself wrapped in a little wonder. Wherever you went, a plastic spider ring turned up in your bag, bright orange or black, too big for your finger, but too cool to toss. You wore it to school the next day, twisting until it snapped. Cheap little trinkets, Somehow they made Halloween last a bit longer. One more day of pretend magic. Late at night, local TV ran shock theater, creature features, chiller. A host in cape or tuxedo introducing black and white monster movies and cracking corny jokes between reels. You'd sneak from bed, turn the volume low, and watch from the couch. Silly and thrilling in equal measure, a secret doorway to a spookier world. Curtains glowed blue in the window. The room smelled of popcorn and dust. You hugged your knees, promising to stay awake tonight. Nothing beat the mini chocolate bars. Milky Way, Baby Ruth, Hershey's wrapped in foil that crinkled just right. They felt fancy, like grown-up candy made child-size. You unwrapped one carefully, letting the chocolate soften before that first bite. Everyone had a favorite. Trading could get intense. In the end, you always had more than needed, yet somehow never enough. Next morning, you'd slip extras into your lunchbox. A couple chocolates, maybe a Tootsie Roll, and hope the teacher didn't notice. A sugar buzz carried you through the day, your costume still crumpled on the bedroom floor. Halloween seemed to slip through your fingers overnight, but the taste of candy at lunch made it linger a little longer. Waking the day after had a feeling of its own. Tired legs, sticky fingers, and a half-empty bag of candy beside the bed. The jack-o'-lanterns looked weary too, their candles puddled to nothing. You replayed the bright moments from the night before and smiled. Childhood doesn't offer many perfect nights, but in the 1960s, Halloween came beautifully close.